are up to forests. It's hard to talk about forests because there's so many different kinds. Where we happen to live in a temperate forest area, that basically means that the forests change with the seasons, which is wonderful for us because we get the beautiful fall show with the leaves changing and and seeing all these different colors come out in the fall. The funny thing about that is most people don't have a clue. They think, hey, they just do it for us. It's a nice, beautiful show in the fall. These trees have to lose their leaves. There's not a choice. Now we have these beautiful evergreens that don't have to lose their leaves, but these trees that lose their leaves, the deciduous trees, someone told me, you can remember it by saying they decide to lose their leaves. They're deciduous. So the reason they do it is because if they didn't, they would lose all the water they have stored inside them in the winter. The ground freezes, the roots can't take in more water. If they kept the leaves, water leaves plants through the leaves. So if they kept their leaves, all the water would go out into the atmosphere and they couldn't replace it. And they would literally become dehydrated and die. So that's why they lose their leaves. That beautiful show is for a reason. But with the changing of the seasons, the trees not only change, the life changes around them too. But let's get back to the trees, because you can't have a forest without trees. So the trees supply homes, they supply shade, and they supply places to hide for animals. Some examples of things that are pretty unique to forests besides the trees, vines. You won't find vines in a field, they can't grow up a tree. This plant adapted or changed to be able to get sunlight by climbing up trees. So we have the famous poison ivy is a vine. We have, everyone knows English ivy, even though it doesn't belong here, it's a vine. There's grapevines. So there's all kinds of vines that take advantage of living in a forest by climbing trees. There's also, since a forest much of the year does have leaves, it's a very shady place. It means it becomes cooler than the rest of the places around it. Therefore, certain plants do well in forests. The soil is damper because it doesn't evaporate as fast, the sunlight isn't reaching the forest floor. So you get ferns and mosses growing on the ground, probably the most common plants. And very shade-tolerant flowers and other plants that can live while having a blanket or umbrella above them covering the sunlight. And animals, obviously, the type of animals that are going to live in the forest are animals that can take advantage of what trees offer. Whether it be homes up in the tree, like squirrels building leaf nests up in the trees and they become great climbers, to the birds that nest way up in the trees, like hawks and crows and things like that. And then, of course, there's low-growing trees, and there's birds that will only nest in the low-growing trees, because that's what they're built for, maybe catbirds and thrashers and birds like that. And then you got the forest floor, which is usually blanketed with leaves. And because it's blanketed with leaves and other once living things, that stuff all rots and goes into the soil. A forest soil is richer than just about any place. It's definitely richer than any place on Long Island that's a terrestrial or land habitat. And that allows a lot of life to live within the soil too. Salamanders and earthworms and millipedes and all kinds of things that are feeding on that dead stuff that lives on the ground and feeding on the things that are feeding on the dead stuff. Trees are also great places for spiders, so are fields, but great places to build webs on trees and on low-growing trees and high-growing trees to catch the flying insects that are flying through the trees. And if you've ever been in a forest at night, you can hear all those insects singing at night, the crickets and the katydids and the cicadas all droning on in the summer night. So there's all kinds of life in a forest that's adapted to living in a place that has trees. Trees also supply food, so you get animals that eat tree nuts, like squirrels and chipmunks, that can bite into acorns and walnuts and actually get to the seed inside. So that's another thing, trees supply food, the leaves supply food. You ever look at leaves, most of them are chewed. Something's been eating them. So there's a lot of food sources in the forest supplied by the trees also. And of course trees go through their own cycle. Besides the seasonal cycle, they also go through their life and death cycle. So in each step along that cycle, a tree is supplying new food and new shelter and new hiding places. First it dies and it's standing. It becomes a home for woodpeckers. They can now get into the side of the trees and eat the juicy grubs that will someday be beetles. There's the owls that kick out the woodpeckers and live in their homes, or they take their homes after they're abandoned. So there's a lot of animals that can take advantage of the softwood of the standing dead trees to live. Then it dies and then it finally falls to the ground and becomes a log. Now it's food for all those living things that live on the ground, and homes for maybe chipmunks. Or maybe if it's a big enough log, a raccoon can go inside and spend some time in there raising its family. So at every step of the way, a tree becomes important to the forest. And as I said before, the seasons are changing, which changes the life all the time too. Birds are going to leave when they run out of food in any ecosystem, including forests. Some are going to hibernate because they no longer have food. The animals that can't find food during the winter, such as box turtles, because they're cold-blooded, they're going to have to hibernate. They're going to have to go underground and sleep for the winter. So things change every season, not only in forests, but all over Long Island. But you see it, I think you see it more in forests than anywhere else. You see those kind of changes, because the trees show you the changes. So at one time, Long Island was covered by, especially the North Shore, was covered by woodlands. And now the only place you really see woodlands is if you go to a nature preserve like Sweetbriar. And we have the wonderful ability to, every time we come to work here, to see the seasons changing and see all the wonderful things that happen with that. Even winter, when the snow is covering the trees, it looks beautiful here. So all through the year, the forest looks beautiful. It doesn't matter what happens. So we want to save these last woodlands here so that we can still have all that beauty and give homes to all this life.